When a distraught child screamed, "Don't eat that!" no one expected what would happen next. The Garden Cafe was a favorite spot for the city's elite, nestled among rows of lush trees with a bubbling fountain nearby. It was mid-afternoon, and the cafe was bustling with life, where elegant waiters glided between the tables, carrying trays of exquisite dishes and steaming coffee. The warm scent of bread wafted in the air, with a faint hint of blooming flowers. But for one man, none of this was remarkable. At a distinguished table in the middle of the cafe, Bernard Green sat, a man whose name was synonymous with power and wealth, who built his empire from scratch, starting with real estate in his 20s, then expanding into projects that few could imagine in his 70s. He carried himself with the confidence of a man who owned not just his own world, but perhaps the world of everyone around him. His elegant posture and golden-framed glasses reflected a life of luxury. Yet, when he looked at the menu, his movements were almost hesitant. Sitting across from him was Marisa, his young wife, who looked as though she had stepped out of a magazine cover, with her shiny black hair framing a carefully sculpted face. Her lips, painted with a deep red, were carefully drawn, and every detail about her screamed elegance, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. She was twirling a diamond-encrusted bracelet around her wrist absent-mindedly, her eyes fixed on the screen of her phone, more interested in it than her husband. Nearby, a boy was lurking behind the stage curtain, relatively young for his age, his silver sequined shirt covering his slender body. His dark eyes darted from one table to another, scanning the plates and pockets, looking for an opportunity. His name was Malik, although no one in the cafe knew him. His face was a familiar sight on this street, a child always without shelter. In the midst of the conversations, and on the fringes of attention, Bernard glanced at his watch and said in a calm but firm voice, "You're late again." Marisa lifted her gaze and smiled, but it was a smile devoid of warmth. "I'm here now," she replied gently, and extended her hand across the table to place it on his. "You know how much I enjoy these lunches." Malik's stomach growled. He moved closer, his steps almost silent. As he leaned on the edge of the balcony, his eyes fell on Bernard's table. It was the kind of food he hadn't seen up close in months. A steaming bowl of white rice, accompanied by fresh bread, and a glass of sparkling water. But then, something unexpected happened. As Bernard adjusted his glasses and picked up his phone, Marissa's hand slipped into her fancy bag. Malik saw her fingers tighten around a small capsule. She opened it with a swift motion and held her hand slightly above the bowl. Al-Bakhari. The liquid disappeared into the bowl, as if it had never been there. Malik's breath hitched in his throat, and he stayed in his place watching her. She stirred the bowl with her spoon without changing her facial expression. Then she turned to Bernard and whispered in a low voice, but it was loud enough to be heard. "After all she's been through, she won't spoil things now." Malik's heart pounded violently, and he sank further behind the wall. He wasn't sure what he saw just now, but the cold way Marisa delivered her words sent a shiver through his body. He clenched his fists and dug his nails into his palms. No one else noticed. No one was paying attention. It was all between him and his conscience. His muscles tensed and his mind raced. The decision races. Does he walk away? Why does he interfere? Who would believe a ragged boy like him? Look at the people in the cafe. Everyone is busy with their conversations and laughter. No one cares. But his eyes returned to Bernard's spoon as it swirled in the soup. His breath quickened. This was not from his imagination. He had seen Marisa earlier in the soup, and he knew what would happen if he tasted it. The old man, he didn't think to push himself away from the fence, and he went straight towards the table, as if his feet were made of lead, but he didn't stop. "Don't eat that?" The talk stopped, the heads turned, and a shock fell to the ground. With a loud voice, Bernard froze his gaze on the distance after a burst from his lips and eyes, the wide ones fixed on the boy. Marisa quickly recovered, and her expressions hardened. "What did you say to the boy?" She said in a sharp voice as if it were a knife. Malik took a step forward. His voice was hesitant, but audible. "I put something in your food. I saw her not eating it." A heavy silence fell, and anxious whispers spread among the guests. Malik stood still, his heart pounding violently, but he did not back down. Then suddenly the policemen entered the cafe. The sound of their steps was shaking the ground under everyone's feet, and they headed straight to the table. One of the officers said in a calm but strong voice, "Is there a problem here?" Then Bernard looked at the officer, then at Malik, who was still standing bravely in his place. Bernard said, "This boy claims that my wife put something in my food." At that point, then everyone's gaze turned to Marisa, who began to retreat in small steps, her eyes searching for an exit. But the officers did not give her the chance, and one of them said, "Madam, do you have anything to say?" Marisa backed away in panic, but as one of the officers approached her, she exploded in anger. "You don't understand anything. Everything was supposed to be for me. Bernard wasn't supposed to last long," he said in a deadly silence. Then the officer said, "Marisa, you are under arrest for attempted murder." The crowd slipped, and the spectators pushed to see the scene, and while they were taking Marisa away, Bernard turned to Malik and said in a calm voice, but full of gratitude, "You saved my life. Oh, my son."